first up, we have Urban Services Director, Steve.
Oh, thank you, Chairperson. Good evening, Council, Mayor. Yeah, we originally thought that we may have Facet here for presentation this evening, but after reviewing the materials and in an effort to make sure we have budget left at the end of this year, we're being pretty judicious about when we deploy Facet, because we'll have a lot of public hearings at the end of the year, maybe maybe extra meetings. We want to make sure we have capacity at the end of the year. So we have a very capable principal planner, Rebecca Lowell, to present the information that was presented at the Planning Commission. It was last week. Last week, boy, I can't keep track of time anymore. So the housing goals and policies were presented at the Planning Commission. They're in your packet this evening. If you have comment tonight, that's great. Not really expecting a lot of comment, but if you have it, we'd love to hear it. The Planning Commission will be reporting back on August 4th at the next meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee and Planning Commission on their changes that they like to see, comments on the goals and policies for the housing element. So then we will report back to Council at the next Development Services meeting on that. And I believe we will have the economic development goals and policies coming right up. Also, Facet has already gotten a draft of those out to staff comment. We'll be reviewing those with them next week to present to Planning Commission and City Council in the next month. So everything's going along with our schedule. So any questions on tonight? If at the end of the night, if there's anything you need from us, please let us know so we can get that to you. Okay.
All right.
Good.
Yes, let's talk buildable lands. Exciting stuff.
Thank you, Council, Mayor. So the first part of the presentation, I was just going to go over a few of the slides that were in your packet already, just to note a few items that Facet went over with the Planning Commission last week. So first one of the things that we had talked to them with was the new population, the new employment, and new homes that we will need to be accommodating over our 20-year planning horizon. And then the secondary discussion was with regard to buildable lands and land capacity too. As I was going through some of these slides, and you'll see if you the memo that I also put in your packet with regard to the buildable lands and land capacity, it's very it's number heavy. There's a lot of information in there, but it did, as I was looking through that information and came to this slide here. I think it's a good example because this slide does have incorrect data on it, but it's really easy to do, and you'll see when we get into the buildable lands, it depends what we're talking about. When population is allocated, it's a 2022 to 2045 allocation, but we only need to plan for 20 years. So we have to net out some of that, the 2022 to 2025 information. So depending on what number you're using for the numerator and denominator, anyway, some of those things will need to be cleaned up as we're moving forward. Just wanted to point that out. It's within the realm of correct, but as we move forward through this process, and you look at a number and you think maybe it looks off, that's very likely why. We just need to be certain that as staff we're looking at what are we talking about and what time frame are we talking about it with. So with regard to the housing goals and policies, of course, just wanted to remind you the meeting that we had several months ago where the planning commissioners came and they spoke to the vision statement that they've put forward, which is what's here on this slide. After that was done, now we're moving into the goals and policies, and that's what was most of the topic at the planning commission meeting. And I thought I would just globally, of course, happy to talk about any of the specific goals or policies, but In general, what you'll see when you look through those, they ensure we've got the state and regional consistency with recent growth management hearing board cases, new policy implementation, new laws that have come into place. And actually in your packet, if you look at the goals and policies, the ones that are strictly required by law have been highlighted in yellow. You might be wondering why some of those were highlighted and some weren't. That was the reason for that, and as you'll see as you look through there, there's a lot of them that are required because of that. And the general themes, housing supply, diversity, affordability, the efficient use of land, housing preservation and improvement, regional coordination, so on and so forth. And really remember the vision statement, and you look at the goals and policies, you'll see parts of that vision statement starting to be woven through those goals and policies with regard to higher density, wanting to encourage more affordable housing, making sure that we're densifying in the center of the city first before we start sprawling outward. It's exciting to see that we've got a huge chunk of work done, and as Director stated, those are with Planning Commission right now. We'll get their comments in the next several weeks, and although we're always happy to have comments from the City Council at any time, you're welcome to log on to Conveyo and start making comments now. You may want to wait, maybe. It's up to you to see maybe the Planning Commission's comments and the Citizen Advisory comments are when you're going through that. And again, when you are on Conveyo, I think one of the, at least for me, when I'm looking through the comments, what's so nice is that you can see what other people have made comments on. You can really see that sometimes provokes just new thoughts, a new way to think about maybe something that was in there. It also makes it easy if you just agree with somebody, you can just hit a thumbs up, or you can write your comment too. I think that makes it nice too. So with that, if there were any questions or comments with regard to the housing element, happy to do that before I jump into buildable land capacity.
Oh, I'll be quick.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna point out, I know that this isn't for you guys, so don't worry. You don't need to ask any questions, or you don't need to answer any questions.
Okay.
Just for the rest of the council, I'm just gonna highlight 3 policies that I can just identify right off the bat that I don't like, that I would encourage us to get rid of or to alter. 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. And in your free time, go ahead and look at those, and you guys can figure out why I don't like them. That is housing preservation and improvement. It looks like it's page 24. Just in your own time, feel free.
Oh, go ahead.
I would just ask, is there a reason that we don't have time to hear?
Staff has indicated several times that they would prefer if we keep our comments to after Planning Commission. I was just trying to be respectful of that.
Okay.
Okay. I was gonna say, and I don't wanna be, if you wanna discuss it tonight, that's fine. I was just being, if you wanna wait till after Planning Commission, it's really, it's your meeting. And I serve at the pleasure. So if you want to discuss those tonight, that's just fine with me.
What's the collective body think?
I'm just asking about the timing of discussion. Do we want you to do your presentation first and then discuss it? I don't know, can you give me an idea what?
Sure, so I think they're really, in my mind at least, my planning brain, they're 2 related but separate topics.
Okay.
So we've got the housing goals and policies, which we're discussing right now, and then we're gonna jump back over to the buildable lands and land capacity, which has a starting point really in the land use element, and is talking about different subject matter. So
Andrew, if you're comfortable, so I've read this, and so I can take it away and read it again, but what I'm wondering is what is it about this that you don't care for?
Oh yeah. I can be, or I'll try and be really quick. So we'll just start with 3.1. So if you just look at the reason for change, remove reference to neighborhood character, which has historically been used to preserve certain type of single-family neighborhoods from change per findings of RDI policy analysis. So we changed the word, but the policy is actually the same. So everything in the policy, if you just changed it back to neighborhood character, promote infill housing that is compatible with abutting housing styles and that contributes to the vitality of the existing neighborhood. To me, that doesn't indicate that I'm going to be able to put up condos in a single family neighborhood or something like that, which is the purpose of the old policy, is to preserve the neighborhood character, quote unquote. I don't agree with that statement. I don't think that we should have it in there.
So you, yeah,
Absolutely.
so you want to, so just hypothetically,
Mhm.
You would like to build condos, in a single family, Rambler neighborhood, I'm just using a,
So Gary and I and Richard Brocksmith all live in kind of the same area. There's an apartment complex that you don't really see that's about a block away. And then there's condos actually across the street from Richard's house. Then we have an 8-bedroom house that's on the corner of that lot. And then my neighbor is actually either a 6 or an 8-plex, and I can't remember. None of those conform.
Right.
None of those look like the rest of the neighborhood. They're all incredible additions. And these are all done before we had things like this written in there, and I'm a big fan of those. I think that they're great. Brings, honestly, just lower income folks into nicer neighborhoods, and you don't see big crime spikes or anything. It's the thing that I think is a great idea overall. I think the code like this sometimes can make that sort of, we only build the same sort of single family house in this neighborhood. I think that's when you get like the big apartment complexes and like, oh, you can only do multifamily over here. And I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't. I don't want to have a policy that says that we are going to promote this if it could be used to do that. That's my personal feeling.
Fair enough. Noah?
And this is my ignorance, what does the state law that encourages infill development, do those two conflict with one another, or how is, because the state is saying that we have to allow these new types of development, correct? So and maybe I'm agreeing with you in what you're saying,
Yeah.
but a different tack here. Because we're having to comply with what the state is now telling us as a city we have to.
Yeah, and we might be conflating two different things. This is just a specific policy that we have, which I don't know that would interact with it negatively. If it could interact with it negatively, then we just don't want it to be there, if that makes sense. But I don't think it could, our code couldn't overwrite that.
Can I ask a clarifying question, if I can? I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly.
Even though I said I wasn't gonna ask anything of you.
That's okay. So the existing policy is compatible with abutting house styles and the character of the existing neighborhood. The suggested policy is compatible with abutting housing styles and contributes to the vitality of the existing neighborhood. It doesn't conform to the character of that neighborhood. It increases the vitality of that neighborhood is the goal, right?
Yeah, I just don't wanna leave it up to, I mean, if you feel like you need to have that policy in there for some reason, you know what? You can have it in there. I think that historically it's been used to do something kind of bad, and so I'd just like to get rid of it in general. Unless it's something that has to be in there.
Yeah, and whatever council wants in it, will go in it, obviously, but I just wanna make sure I was understanding it correctly, cause I look at, when I read through these, I think of middle housing, right? It's not conforming with the existing neighborhoods, but it certainly would add some vitality, some more people, some different families, some different income groups, some different everything, right?
I'm so happy that that's your interpretation,
Probably.
but it's still in your, that's up to your interpretation. So if we have something that's there, I just don't understand why we would have it, so it's left to interpretation.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Jamie.
What if we reworded it then? I mean, what if we catch two stones here? What if we reword it so it says it something differently? So it appeases us and you, like, at the same time. So that actually has that in there.
I'm always a fan of deleting when it comes to code, not adding, but
I mean,
could
just
be talked
putting
into it.
different verbiage in there instead of, instead of deleting it and, or whatever, I mean, what if it has something similar to what you're saying and it's actually spelled out, so that if someone is questioning, it's in there that way.
But we could certainly talk about that, sure.
I don't know, I mean, I'm just spelling it out there, so if somebody goes, oh, hey, I don't know, but, and it has a code in there that says, to accommodate different visions or.
Sure. And like I said, I was just bringing these up for people to look at if we come up with some other stuff, and I was just trying to give you guys some background for what I think it was used to do historically in the past.
Okay.
Same thing with the one below. Oh, sorry.
I was just curious what the intent was of this section of like what we're trying to prevent in our neighborhoods.
So I think it might be helpful, so as you know, we have 13 goals of the GMA. One of them is to preserve existing housing stock, and I was thinking about getting online and looking up the 13. I'm sorry I don't have them with me, but I believe that is what that tie is to. And again, it's from our 2016 comp plan. So different time, mostly different council that those were there with, but we're also happy, especially if we know that there's concerns with certain policies, we'll come back to the next meeting with all the information and we can come back with suggestions too. And also are always welcome to, if there are specific other suggestions. That's great. I mean, that's why we're here. So.
The way I look at it and what I believe, this is how I think of it, is I don't want to impose on a neighborhood some totally out of character housing, whatever the word is I want to use, housing block. I think it's reasonable for the neighbors to feel like their neighborhood's still gonna sort of reflect what they bought. I remember this sticks in my head from last time. I was talking to a developer about, about moving when you start with the single family home and then you might go to a 2-story and then you might go to an apartment complex, just kind of gradually increasing the sizes. And I said, somebody in a single family home probably doesn't want a 4-story apartment complex next to them. And he says, well, they're just gonna have to live with it. That is stuck in my brain for all these years because I thought, how rude is that? I mean, you're not caring about anybody else. You need to have some compassion for, just like this, not just because you're gonna make money on it. I don't need to make you money. I want it to fill. I mean, I know what Andrew's talking about with his neighborhood. I agree. It doesn't look out of whack. And that's not how I'm reading it. I'm reading it more, I don't really wanna have a 4-story apartment complex next to a single family home. That's kind of my thought on that.
I think we have other codes that would prevent that from happening, like height limitations and stuff like that. This is really just a broad policy that I think that could be used to rationalize other actual bad codes in the future. But it doesn't mean that it's like taking away your choice or options in the future to write policy. This is just a policy, it's not taking away your ability to write code in the future. That could be what you're talking about. This is just a policy that would inform or back up that thing, and you can still do it. I just don't agree with having it in here.
made notes on what you're, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the planning commission, their take on it too, bring that back, obviously. They're the ones that really have a more important voice than I.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what they have to say, so thank you for that. And thanks, Andrew, for, going ahead and talking about it now.
Sure, yeah. Same thing for 3.2, 3.3. The same conversation. 3.3, we don't have to go into it. It's just as soon as we start with recognize that over time, I don't think that that's a useful thing to have in there, and I'd be fine with getting rid of that.
And so essentially, and I'm just throwing this out there, and anybody can say whatever they want. I welcome that, but so we just take that out, and it doesn't affect what we do with our code work, right? So it's just that we're just not singling this out in a policy. I mean, that's the intent. Anybody else have any other questions? Everyone?
This is a question for Kevin. The state giving cities goals and the legislation that they created encouraging cities to do this, what are the possibilities of our ordinance being in conflict with what the state is saying we have to do?
You have certain clearly defined bright line mandates on how the city has to accommodate different densities, different types of structures, even to a granular level, how you relegate parking. But there's other areas where you still retain local discretion, so perhaps you have to accommodate mental housing. It doesn't say exactly in the manner in which you reach that. You could make sure that that mental housing in single-family residential neighborhoods is similar in design, so let's just throwing it out there. So it's compatible with the aesthetics of said neighborhood. I'm not a policymaker, but that's just an example of the discretion in your, as you as a city council have with complying with these mandates when the state gives you such discretion. And that's going to be informed by the goals that you adopt in your comp plan, which will be used to support the actual development regulations that people will vest to and will be applied to the development. Hopefully that was clear and not as opaque as mud.
Rebecca, what are we seeing other cities around Washington do when it comes to something like this? Because I do agree with you, Andrew, that the United States has a history of redlining and using certain ordinances and regulations that way. What are other cities around Washington doing to accommodate what the state has set as its goals that we can no longer do than maybe we did in the past? Using ordinances, maybe, hopefully.
I was gonna just preface this a little bit to add on to what Attorney Rogerson was speaking of. So 1990 we ended up with, we had 13 goals of GMA. And at that time, and the legislation was very clear that those were given, it was supposed to be a bottom-up process, right? And that, you have these 13 goals that inherently, they honestly do conflict with each other. We need to provide housing and population growth and protect the environment and protect private property rights, and the list goes on. But then it was up to local governments to decide, how are you going to do those goals? What is more important to each different community? The legislative sessions of recently have really turned it really more into a top-down approach, which has been really, say interesting as a planner, you know, of my age and having done this work for, you know, for a while, because there are other states like Oregon. Oregon is very much a top-down approach to growth management. In the state of Washington, we haven't been. We do, you know, like Kevin was talking about, there are laws that will require certain things, like for example, there's a goal with regard to protecting the environment. And around 2007, we ended up with legislation that came out that said, cities shall use best available science, right? So suddenly if you had jurisdictions that weren't taking the environmental considerations, say they thought that was less important than other things, suddenly that had to flip a little bit, right? So we really are in this really unusual time of trying to match up what the state wants and what they're telling us with keeping some of that local control and making sure that policymakers like you have the discretion that you should and you were always intended to be able to do. But it has been difficult. Also the timing of those, the laws that we're looking at, keep in mind that when these were adopted, we didn't have rulemaking. So it's really unusual to have new laws come out and we don't have the associated wax to go along with them, right? So there's a lot of behind the scenes and, you know, with different cities and planning staff, we're going, what are you doing? You know, have you tackled this problem yet? How are you addressing it? And that's very unusual in our state to have that happen. We're usually not in that position. So, and I say that just as a prelude to say, other cities are kind of in the same spot we are. So I can tell you that the original goal and policy that the councilman mentioned that we were talking about, 3.1 to 3.3, it's pretty standard language. I bet you could probably, over half of the pre-2025 comp plans, I would bet probably have something very similar to it. But now we're in a position of updating them, right? And that's exactly what we're here doing, to make sure that we know what our council wanted in 2016, but now we need to make sure that today that we're changing things to fit what you want to see in your city.
It's almost like we did such a good job of constricting what could happen for such a long time that then the state was like, oh, we can't let them have local control anymore. And this is a response to that. They said as much.
A good legal example was in the early 2000s. There's two competing policies and your 16 goals. One is a very strong policy, you need to reduce urban sprawl. We don't want big, sprawling, I go to Arizona and I drive to my parents' house, and it's just one big suburbia for miles and miles. So Washington State is reduce urban sprawl. But it's also preserve existing neighborhood characteristics. So there was a growth board case that came out and said, well, we believe anything below 5 DUs an acre, 4 DUs, 4 dwelling units an acre, anything that is less intense than that constitutes urban sprawl. The growth board, it's not a legislative body, it's an independent quasi-judicial body, so that's the rule, we're interpreting that to be the rule. And the Superior Court, I think it might have went all the way to the Supreme Court, said no. It's still your decision as a local body to determine what goal that is. It can be lower than that. And in this context, it's as if the state legislature said, okay, fine, it's going to be this bright line rule now, because we don't want you to have that discretion any longer. I don't think they did that particularly, but it's kind of like that give and take.
Go for it.
Could you help me understand what that bright line is?
Well, there's a lot of bright lines that have been created. That's the thing, is that there's been bright lines on parking, on ADUs, on setbacks. So there is just a lot of centralized planning now. So all of those mandates, you know, it's legislative fiat. That's what you do. The remainder, you still retain local control because the Growth Management Act is still a valid body of law. And I'm sure there's growth board cases that have balanced those issues too, and how you comply with both.
Absolutely, and I was gonna say that hopefully will be of help. We do, I can email or figure out a way to get this to council. We do have a list of all of the recent legislation, if that would be of help with regard to from ADUs to middle housing. And that list is also will help drive the development regulations that we'll be amending later this year. So.
I have a question, Andrew, this is sort of for you, and then Demi and Steve as well, based on some things that you said. I'm a huge fan of less is more, generally speaking. But as opposed to, I'll just use 3.1, eliminating it entirely, it would something like promote infill housing that contributes to the vitality of existing neighborhoods. So you're getting rid of the whole compatible and abutting stuff.
Say it again.
Promote infill housing that contributes to the vitality, is what Steve was saying, of the existing neighborhoods. So it's not saying it has to all be single family. I mean, we are a very diverse community, and I very much want our housing to be, and our neighborhoods to be diverse. I understand where you're coming from, Mary. I do, but I don't know.
That would be better for sure. I'm just looking for things that could be used to justify bad code in the future, and if you don't have abutting housing styles in there, then I'm much more happy with that. Because just as a general concept for everybody here, I think that when we have only multifamily in an area, we create areas that are less habitable than other areas, and when we only allow triplexes in one area or whatever, it just creates, and I think it's a bad policy. So I want to try and get rid of that in the future. And when I see abutting housing styles, I see more of that sort of spot zoning happening again. And so just in general, I'm going to try and over time squash that.
To your point, Steve, I do want to say thanks for bringing up the vitality piece of it, because I understood where you were coming from and the understanding of that as well. Or at least I think I have an idea of what you're thinking. So.
Thank you. Thank you guys for taking the time.
Of course, that's
I know
what
that
we're
this probably
yeah.
bores you to tears, and I apologize.
Randy, you got any thoughts? Any other questions? All right, Rebecca, keep going.
All right, thank you. So these next few slides aren't in your packet, but I went ahead and I included a few of them because our planning commission meeting, one of the things that we've been talking about and we're actually talking a little bit about it tonight, is just the baseline GMA 101 information. And unfortunately, now that we've had two different consultants and we've had sort of a disjointed process, and since I wasn't at any of the beginning meetings with the prior consultant, I really wasn't aware of, what have you been told, what have, planning commission or city council, with some of that. And they expressed an interest in really, just the high points of really some more of that GMA 101, because it occurs to me that we're jumping right into like the minutia, right? And just pulling it back just a little bit, to kind of just give you some baseline information, and if it's helpful at some of the next meetings too, I'm also happy to elaborate on that. Maybe go over the 13 goals, how some of them have been changed over the years, if that's of interest. That's normally how I would start the presentation. So,
Steve, will you make a note of that? Demi's interested in that.
perfect.
The next. Yeah, thank you. And you will. Thank you.
All right, so the first few slides here, as we're talking about buildable lands and land capacity analysis, I thought you might be interested in knowing exactly who comes up with the population numbers, how are they distributed, who decides this, right? So I had some slides from 2016 that I quickly cut a few out, and just thought I'd kind of review that, because that leads into the buildable lands and how many homes, we take our population and our homes, how do we come up with those numbers? The graphic on the left-hand side here, the process that we go through is legislated by state law. RCW 3670A is the Growth Management Act. And what it states is that the Washington State Office of Financial Management shall prepare population estimates, and they are required to prepare a low, a medium, and a high. And they give those to all of the counties. And then the counties in turn are required to work with the different cities to allocate population out. So in Skagit County, we have what's called a framework agreement. And that agreement was a result of a Growth Management Hearing Board case, and it was first adopted in 95-ish, my best guess. With regard to this population allocation, there's other things in this framework agreement, but with regard to how we're going to split up population, there is what's called a Growth Management Act Steering Committee, and that is comprised of the Skagit County Commissioners and the mayors or appointed council that make up that group. And then there's a Technical Advisory Committee, and that Technical Advisory Committee is staff from the county and all of the different cities that meet, and then they give recommendations up to the Growth Management Steering Committee, and that committee makes the decisions with regard to which population numbers are going to be chosen, and really how is that going to work. So this year, and I apologize, this isn't the greatest graphic, but I just had to clip it right out of a report, which is actually, if anyone's interested, this is, and this might be some of the interesting background information, there are actually two of these reports that were done for Skagit County. This is the final one, and it goes through all of the different iterations and how this was done. But specific to this, what this shows here is the historic population and this is Skagit County, so this is before anything is split out and divvied up between the counties and the cities. And this year what was chosen was the OFM medium, population projection. I think I put a little arrow there because it was kind of hard to see which one that was. Now historically in 2016, the medium, which is also supposed to be the best fit basically of the data, was used. The comp plan before that, it was something like the medium minus 5% or something like that. But as you can see for Skagit County and the cities, they actually looked at not only just the low, medium, and high, they also looked at some of this other sort of information in determining how exactly they're going to land on that medium projection. So then what happens with Skagit County, although this same process of splitting this population out happens with every county, they have to decide what percent of the population is going to be urban and which is going to be rural. In Skagit County, that is an 80-20 split. So 20% of the future population is going to go to the rural areas outside of incorporated cities, and then 80% of that growth is going to be allocated to the cities and towns. And I've updated the numbers here so you can see the existing population, the new population that's being distributed, and then what those are anticipated to total in 2045. And so what that means to this year is that close to 6,000 people will be allocated to our rural areas, and close to 24,000 will be allocated to what we loosely call our urban areas. And then, so we have that first split. And then we need to, all the cities and towns need to meet, and we need to take that 80% and further divvy it up between everyone. And this is what this looks like. This has already been, this is something that the growth management, this has already been decided, how this is going to be split up. But I still think it's interesting to look at it and understand that, you know, where these numbers come from and how they come about, right? So really what you see here is that Mount Vernon has historically, and we continue now, to take the lion's share of the growth, although I can tell you at least from the 2016 allocations, we're taking slightly less growth than we did in 2016. And then we've got Anacortes and Burlington that are around 20%, almost the same. Cedar Woolley real close to 20% too. And then I just lumped all the others, which is Connor, Hamilton, Lyman, the Swinmish, all together. They're just a little 3% there. And then each of us cities now, we then are required to do a land capacity analysis to show how we can accommodate the folks that we've been allocated. And that's also why we end up with two different reports from the county. We end up with one saying, here's the preliminary numbers of what we want you to allocate, and then the report that I've got here is the final number after all the jurisdictions are able to say, hey, we've taken a preliminary look and we feel that we can provide the number of homes and people that we've been allocated. But then we have to actually do that work, right? We've got to prove it up, So the memo that was in your packet with regard to buildable lands and land capacity, so I'll start out with saying, of course it's preliminary. Ordinarily I wouldn't have started that work right now, but we had a few questions from folks and planning commissioners that were interested in it, so I thought, hey, it might be worth it to just start off with some preliminary information just to get the broad brushes of why when you hear staff say, we're not going to have a problem fitting our allocations. This is just the preliminary information showing you why that is. Also to keep in mind, we have this, unfortunately, the schedule that we're on now. We are where we are, but as you recall, this year we're going to adopt the land use element, and it'll have a land capacity analysis. Which in the memo, and I didn't plan on going into sort of a minutia detail, but there is a difference between a buildable lands analysis and a land capacity analysis. The first 2 pages of the memo really provided you an outline of how and why they're different. In Mount Vernon, we have done a buildable lands and land capacity analysis since at least 2005. So it's been part of a regular work plan that we do. However, we're technically not required to do the buildable lands part of it. But what we've always found is that to do the land capacity in the most thorough way possible, we have always taken that look backwards to see what we've historically produced, which is most of the work product for buildable lands. So it's always made sense to say, we're gonna wrap our hands around all of it. So that can be confusing because there is a difference. We use both the terms together, but now for 2026, we're gonna split off just the land capacity part of it. But then in 2027, when we have the buildable lands and land capacity all finished, we'll end up amending the land use element to put that appendix in there, and there'll be some of the information and it'll have to be updated, but so, sorry, we'll go from there. The next map that I have here, and this is again kind of going backwards a little bit, sort of the GMA and City of Mount Vernon 101, but I think it really is interesting. So the green areas that you see on this map here, those are our incorporated city limits within the City of Mount Vernon, right? But then we have areas to the north, east, south, and west of us that are our urban growth areas. Those are shown in kind of the orangey, light orange color there. Those areas were identified in the early 1990s when GMA first came into, was first adopted, and all cities had to identify areas within which cities would grow over time. So our UGAs have changed slightly over the last, I'd say, 20 years, with the exception of South Mount Vernon, which was a really big change that was annexed in around 2006. But when we look at this, you can see we have some good sized urban growth areas in the city. Could be of interest to you, but so let's say you are a property owner in one of those urban growth areas. Of course, you're not in the city, you're in Skagit County, right? But you also don't comply with the city of Mount Vernon's development regulations. If you want to get a building permit or do anything with your property in a UGA, you go to Skagit County. And most of these residential areas in Skagit County, I believe, are what they call a urban reserve residential area. And I believe it's been at least a year since I've looked at this, but historically what they would allow is 1 home per 5 acres. So it's slightly more density than most other areas in the county would allow. Sort of the county's, I'd say that the base rural reserve zoning allows for 1 home per 10 acres. So they say, hey, in the UGA area, we're gonna allow slightly more because we anticipate someday that these areas will become part of the city. And they really are planned to do that. Also, interestingly, the timing of when those come into the city, completely in your hands. That is a legislative decision that the city council gets to make when we get into an annexation. So the next few slides, sorry.
Oh, before we go, sorry.
When we would decide that, would we prepare preliminary reports of what that would cost us as a city to?
In general, most of the annexations that we've had over time have been brought to the city from a property owner in one of those urban growth areas. So when that's the case, we have, of course, we have lots of forms, right? There's a specific form they would fill out. It's called an intent to annex. They would have to get property owners representing what's been allowed 10% of the assessed value of the area proposed to be annexed. Would all have to agree to that, and there's a lot of additional information they would provide us, and then as staff, we would come to you and say, what do you want to do? Would you like to move this forward or not? And if you did want to move it forward, the next step for the applicant would be, then they have to go out and get the signatures of the property owners representing 60% of the assessed valuation of the area that they want to be annexed in. And if I'm wrong on those percentages, I'll send out an email tomorrow, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. The only time that, at least over my tenure with the city, that something hasn't been initiated by a property owner is with South Mount Vernon. I'm going to go back to this on the far south side of the city from about Blackburn Road down to Hickok Road, surrounding both sides of I-5. 560 acres, I think. So it was a really large annexation that the city took in 2006, I believe it was final. And that was that was a lot. It was a very contentious process. People for and against, and all sorts of fun stuff there. But the city did finally annex that in. And really a lot of the impetus behind the city wanting to annex that area in is because it's commercially zoned. And as we see now, we've got a lot of really great, more industrial businesses down there. So that was the reason that came in. So really with the rest of the memo, what I really wanted to, I'm just going to kind of go over this at a high level, and then of course we'll be talking more about this for, in the coming months as this information is refined. But first thing that we looked at was we said, hey, we have a 20-year planning horizon, not a 22 or 25-year planning horizon. So the initial population allocations, and the same thing will be true with homes when we get there, those have to then be reduced out, right? So that's where those numbers, when we say, hey, different numbers might look a little bit different on different documents, but it really is gonna depend on, are you looking at the number that was allocated, or are you looking at the net number after we make it 2025 to 2045? But for the purposes of this, I didn't have the net number, but I thought, even so, let's just keep it at the little over 5,000 new homes that we have to accommodate after 2045. And then to get to those number of homes, we had basically two different categories that we looked at. I had sites within the city limits itself that had good planning data available. And what we could show with that is we could accommodate a little over 3,000 new dwelling units within those areas. Now, those of you that were here in 2016, what we used to call that category is our pipeline development. And I'm sure, well, I'm guessing you may remember we had a few developers that, for different reasons, that term they felt conveyed a message that that information didn't really represent. So this time when we were going back through this, I thought, hey, by all means, let's call it something different. So that name may change a little bit, but it was just preliminary information, I thought. And really what that means is the developments that are shown, and then I've got a whole table and a map that shows where they're all located. I think maybe Eaglemont might be a good example, although there's a lot of other ones. Eaglemont was approved to have, I believe, 534 dwelling units that can still be developed in there. They had all the studies, all the information done to quantify that number of homes that could be built in there. So when we think about the buildable lands in the context of all it is a model, that's all we're doing is saying, we're putting together a model with the best information we have to figure out how many homes could be built in the city, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense to put properties where we have better information than our model has into the model. So that's why we separate those out. And we say we don't even need to run those through the model because we have this better data. So let's separate all those out from those. And so that, so you can see, you know, our goal is that we need to show that we can accommodate a little over 5,000 new homes. Just with the developments within the city limits, we're up to a little over 3,000 already. And then I sat back and I was like, all right, I don't have good information from a model yet to tell you what else we could fit inside the city limits, just because we've had much more growth inside the city limits. But I do have the data from 2016 for our urban growth areas, and there's far less growth that occurs in those areas just by virtue that they're in the county. So I thought, well, let's just start with that information, net out the development that has occurred in that area, and I made the guesstimate that I made was way higher than what actually is ever going to occur there. But what that ended up showing is that within our UGAs, we could fit an additional 3,700 approximately new dwelling units. So you can see here, if our goal was a little over 5,000, without even including the other areas within the city limits, we're already, we've exceeded that with a margin, right, to go.
And we are allowed to count development within the current UGA towards our goals.
We're supposed to. So really what we're supposed to do is say, city limits and these urban growth areas, because they are intended to be annexed in. And they will be, I don't know when, but eventually they will be part of the city. So this is just an image of the table and the map that's in your packet that you can see, and I just provided a number on the map put it on the map here and then just gave some additional details in case when you were looking at that, thinking, where is that, or which one, is it? So, again, updated information, of course, is still pending, but the preliminary data suggests that, we will have enough capacity, in the city and the UGAs, without any issues at all, to be able to accommodate the growth that we're expected to accommodate over the next 20 years. Again, I'm gonna harp back to the, because sometimes, and it's happened in 2016, and I'm trying really hard to just do anything I can different so we don't get into this back and forth with the model issues, right? Really just by saying, what we do outside of those areas where we know we have really good planning data, all we're doing is creating a model. No models are perfect, but we use the best available data that we have. And if somebody has suggestions or better data that, you know, that we can take and use in our system, that absolutely will take it. Because it just makes the information that we have and that we can provide to you better, and you can make more informed decisions. And then lastly, the one question that I think sometimes it's on me, we kind of forget to talk about, but you know, because we hear this sometimes, oh no, you know, the data that your staff has isn't correct. So what if it's not? What if we don't have enough room, right? Let's go right to like the worst case. Let's say we were completely wrong and we're gonna need more room than what we've got. What happens? Well, what happens then is that the city identifies new urban growth areas, right? So there's no, let's say, the process just goes on, right? First happened in 1990. It happened to be that the city of Mount Vernon, we ended up with urban growth areas that are very large and we haven't grown into yet, but someday we will. And then someday, when those get full and our elected officials decide that you want to expand your urban growth areas again, that'll be your decision to make. So, and with that,
Help me understand the things that we would have to do if we did annex an urban growth area. We would have to hook up water and sewer to every single one of those addresses, correct?
so yes, but under certain conditions. So when we annex in an area, we don't go door to door and say, hey, now you need to hook up to sewer. So existing structures that are there and they're on septic, we have in the past, and we have development regulations that are currently in effect now. The city will waive your connection fee if you do decide you want to hook up to our sanitary sewer, but you're not required to. But when your septic system fails, that's when you're going to need to do that, right? And of interest, maybe we have a handful of properties still in South Mount Vernon that are still on septic. Even some of the really big commercial buildings have enormous septic systems, but they've been operational and they've been fine all these years, so they will just continue there until they stop functioning, and then they're going to have to connect to our sewer system. But new development in the urban growth area, so different than the existing, they would need to connect. We have a few, like, what do they call them, off-ramps to that rule, depending on like the distance between the property and where our sewer main is. We do have some limited options, but the general rule of thumb is yes. So when you're in the city and you're doing new development, you're gonna need that, you're providing urban level of service. So suddenly your roads are gonna look different when we go to extend a new road, or if the developer is extending it. We're gonna have a curb gutter and sidewalk, usually on both sides of the street. services will be different, sanitary sewer, that you're provided there, you won't have to, maintain a septic system anymore, sort of those types of things. So yeah, so eventually they will, transition to urban services, but it doesn't have to happen immediately upon annexation.
The city's adopted annexation policies in the past that considers a variety of factors that go into when you expand your borders from unincorporated lands. Because you will be assuming responsibility of providing essential services to those areas. You gotta make sure that it doesn't suddenly degrade existing city services. And concurrency is a requirement of the GMA to make sure that roads, water service, sewer, fire, and police all can be provided at urban levels. So your policies reflect that and other needs of the city. That's informed by your buildable lands analysis and your needs analysis. Good mixes of commercial, industrial, and residential also.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I always, in my mind, just because it's what I do, I think of sanitary sewer and roads, but police and fire, suddenly those are our areas, and we're responsible for paying for all those services. So when we do get annexation proposals, I think I just said there's a lot of reports that get skimmed over, but those are the things that we're looking for. We wanna know, how encumbered that properties are going to be with critical areas, what types of uses, and then really that's a lot of the policy discussion, that goes on with city council is, knowing what it's gonna cost you in terms of funding the services that are necessary. Is that something you're, that you really want to do or not?
Any other questions? Rebecca, can you do me a favor? The first several slides where you started with the GMA, RCW, and then you slid it down next several slides. Could you drop that in our packet? Because
Absolutely, yes, it's, I already have
so
it there.
much easier to understand this way than the way I've been thinking about it all these years. It's just like, oh wow, look at that. Look at the flow.
Thank you. Yeah, and I absolutely, and that was sort of the, just as staff wondering, like, if it were me, I think about this when I start, just because sort of my job is split between long range and current planning, and I think about long range planning, just having that framework in your head of where do the goals and policies fit in? You know, where do the development regulations fit in this? So there's definitely a lot of information from 2016 I can update, and hopefully it will be helpful or informative. And
I just wanted to say real quick, thank you for the map and for the details of what number one matches here. Super helpful. So thank you for doing that.
All right, any other questions? All right, moving on in the agenda, we have miscellaneous. I believe the mayor has a.
Does anyone else have any miscellaneous?
Oh,
Over here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I would love it if we all did more outreach stuff to the community. And next Saturday is the Youth Arts Festival. And I already talked to Jennifer, and she said that we can have a table if we want it. And I think it'd be cool if we were there and talking to parents and making some art with kids. So I wanted to hear what other thoughts were. We need at least 2 people there at the booth if we do it.
I've been asked to stay away from the youth, so I can't.
that's okay.
I think we need education, but I'm all for doing other things. So I actually had somebody reach out and was wondering if we could do something with Isaac up at the farmer's market. That group that came that said they were having a hard time finding out what was going on, or just because they were not on a computer. Or just having those things. So he was like, his suggestion was that maybe we have something in the farmer's market so people would know, if they do that on a computer, where to go look for the agenda, or where what's going on, other options, so I said, yeah, I would be happy to reach out to everybody, pick our brains what we think would be a best way to reach people that maybe aren't on a computer to know what's going on, so.
So you're talking the 25th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the 25th from, let's see, it's 11 to 3, so it's 4 hours. I imagine we wouldn't need to do shifts, it would just be a few folks doing 4 hours.
Are we putting this in the nap circle? So we can like
Bring
help.
your rug.
And now
If
you're
that's what you wanted to do.
we're putting you in the dump tape.
That's right.
Oh no, I was saying that talking about what we do would create, I thought we could be an assistant.
That could be our proposed activity, if we so choose.
But you're talking arts and doing a craft with.
Yeah, and really, I figured we could have, like, at our table, we could have information and stuff for parents. Cause our meetings are not a space where people typically want to bring young kids. They're not gonna show up to our meetings. So I think this could be a really good place to do outreach to parents of young kids. And then we would have an activity for the kids to do as well.
I paid money to see his thoughts on the
I
screen.
would too,
right
I was like,
That'd be awesome. It has like coloring sheets already.
Hi, Rebecca.
done that you use for different colors.
Oh, we're gonna
Thank
fill
you,
in
Rebecca.
a zoning map.
There you go. Printed a whole bunch out.
I think it's a great idea, Hannah. I'm not available, but I do think it's a great idea.
I'd be
you-
willing to help out.
Awesome.
What day is it?
You wanna do it?
Yeah, we can talk about it. You
Okay,
don't want me
deal.
there, but that sounds
Deal.
great.
Okay, that's all.
alright, Mayor.
Okay, first thing, when I sent the email for Fifth Wednesday last week, there were some ideas on there. One of them was strategic planning. So I just wanted to kind of gauge interest in that because we haven't talked about it before. And we haven't planned strategically before as a group, but looking at potential facilitators for something like that to put together a 3-year or 5-year plan for the city that all of us inform and something that informs our budget process and everything else. It's an idea. I reached out to AWC a couple weeks ago, asked for recommendations for facilitators. One of the facilitators that I talked to and interviewed is, her name is Una McAllendon. I just sent you her information and was hoping you would look over that and we could talk about this more on Fifth Wednesday, Committee of the Whole. Is this even something that we want to do? It would be great to get it done when I talk with her. It'd be nice to do this before the budget process, if we can, and she is available. We could do something probably September-ish. She's looking at what she usually does, and when I say usual, she's worked with councils and mayors at City of Shelton, City of Leavenworth, City of North Bend, Linwood, Bothell, Rampton, Snoqualmie. She's done this before. And I told her it wouldn't hurt for our group to have, part facilitator, part therapist. But she's done that. There's nothing she hasn't seen, and so, and worked through with people. So
Is there a cost
there is. I didn't want to talk about
coming
that.
out of your
Yeah.
budget?
Maybe.
Okay, all right.
I'd be willing to potentially foot the bill if.
Saturday kind of a thing for that.
Yeah. So the way she does this is she does it in 3 days, but 2 of those are council. Council would be involved in 2 of those. So it'd be like a 9 to 3 on maybe a Saturday, or maybe we have. I think I saw that we have a 5th Wednesday. Maybe it's in September or October. So maybe we do it on the 5th Wednesday and we come in at like 3 and go to 8 or something like that. But 2 days. The first day she sets aside is current reality and vision. And the second day is obstacles and contradictions and strategy. And then the third day is implementation. That's with staff. So here's the direction that council wants to go, and now we got to figure out how to get there and chart that out. Yes.
The soonest we could get the dates, I would, if we're gonna do it on a different time than council, I would
Mhm.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I hear you.
Just
Okay.
because schedules.
Didn't want to book this without talking about it.
Yeah.
The first year that Andrew and I were on council, we had a council retreat. Is that not something that is normally scheduled?
not always.
Yeah, oh, okay,
Yep.
so that was just that year that.
Yep, we did that, like our first year, and talked about housing and things like that, went on that tour, yeah. And I think something more formal than that, something that we can walk away with clear, direction. This is where we wanna go as a city. So, anyway, don't need to decide now. Let's maybe talk about it if, Mayor Pro Tem, you are gonna be running fifth Wednesday. We could put it on the agenda maybe for that. The next thing is, wanted to let you know, Transportation Benefit District is on next week's agenda. There will be a presentation on it. Part of that process is that we have to advertise for a committee that's for and a committee that's against, and get interested parties. I think we did this for the levy, right? Okay. So we ran those. We ran a couple of days advertisements for those committees. Right now, we have three people who are interested in the for committee. We don't have anyone in the against committee, but it's not too late. We can only have 3 people in a committee. If we don't assemble those 3 people in the against committee, people could still register through the county, I think it's the auditor or elections office, to sign up for those. But those names will be on the agenda for approval, for your approval, so that you know who it is. Right now, the 3 who have expressed interest are Luann Burkhart, she's a planning commissioner, Suzanne Butler, and Gary Molinar. You've heard him before. So we can have 0 people, 1 person, up to 3. So that's who, and then those folks write a statement for or against in the voters pamphlet. Next one is the committee of the whole agenda. Again, I sent this out, I think, last week. Wanted to clarify one thing. The legislative priorities that I listed on there, I don't expect us to have a discussion about each one of those things. I just was hoping that each of you would prioritize that list and say, top from 1 to 6, these are the ones that I want staff to put first on their to-do list. An example of that, like my list, my only clear number one was e-bikes, and 2 was council codes, and then I have data centers, crypto, the Kratom was on there, best siting, things like that, yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
I looked at that too. Is there any way we could combine like the crypto, the data center, all in one?
Possibly, but what your priorities from this, your collective priorities, will inform Kevin's office to say, hey, write us some code for this, get it on an agenda, and let's pass it.
Got it. Okay.
So,
thank you.
Well,
That's-
I'm just curious, on the data centers and the BESS, is there anyone here that doesn't want us to do a moratorium?
I think it's absolutely worth discussing.
Okay.
Yes, one day we will probably have BESS. It is going to probably happen. Might not happen in the next decade, but one day it probably will.
So let's pull out data centers. Is there anyone that is adamantly opposed to doing a moratorium like the county did?
I think that it's worth a discussion as well.
I was just trying to figure out how many Demi can knock out.
Oh,
I
sure.
just was thinking we could put all 5 of them together and just be like.
Well, so
Yeah.
I was
There's
reading through Kratom,
Well,
and
can we just put them all together and
the
say
Mayo Clinic says Kratom is bad, has withdrawal symptoms similar to opioids, and it's just sold at gas stations. I'd be fine with just getting rid of Kratom if anybody feels differently.
I know Mary's been asking for a while, so maybe we
I'm
just
getting a
want
lot
to
of
do
head
that.
nods. Randy, how do you feel about Kratom?
Not pro.
Okay,
There we go. I think we just.
I think we
found
can
our
just
first
knock
item.
that one off, and we can just say that we're gonna just. Does that sound reasonable?
Is that the number 1 priority you want Kevin's office to work on right now?
I don't think it's probably that important, but I don't think that we need to talk about it though.
Just be
Gotcha,
aware
yeah.
sometimes.
No, I don't either.
Sometimes you always have to weigh, the state legislature had 3 bills last Olympia. You could do something and next legislative session they do it and then it preempts you.
I'll leave it up to
But,
you, but if
you know,
not,
you still have local discretion, you go to the city, you have full hours to exercise your?
I didn't know it was a thing. I would never walk into a gas station and buy something that was advertised on like a lean-to sign, and it just never occurred to me. But now that I've been aware of it, like we have a bunch of them around here.
We do, absolutely.
And it is a big problem.
It's becoming apparent about Cascadia Daily News called today about the city. Does the city have a, that was Kratom, does the city have a Kratom ban?
Really?
Yeah, and just let them know that you'll be discussing and prioritizing that with other items on the 28th, 29th.
How about the crypto?
Crypto
It's like, is there anything we can just knock out?
I would like that.
That's already good. We're doing a proposal on that.
Okay.
We're drafting it.
Okay, we're already
Success.
drafted there.
Yeah, the center should be, if
Right
you
there.
guys want to go more time. I'm gonna be reviewing it. Drafting it.
When we say crypto, are we just talking about ATMs that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what they're doing is they're targeting people, and that is how they're getting their money. Is they're like, say you get something on your phone and it tells you have to go to these machines. That's the only way you're going to get your quote freedom back, is if you go to the machines and you get this sort of money. And most people that are vulnerable that maybe don't understand have may possibly get language barrier, possibly just other difficulties and disabilities, and they're targeting those people in general.
There might be a better title for that discussion, because crypto is huge.
Yeah.
As long as we understand what we're talking about, it's just kind of a placeholder. Is that
Okay.
fair?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we eventually need a better.
You got 2 weeks to come up with something.
Yeah. You're on the hook.
Okay, the final thing quickly, opioid funding that we committed to North Star priorities. There was a committee that was formed to put out an RFP for our named priority, which was housing, bridge housing. Okay, Mary served on that committee, or recovery housing. Mary served on that committee, Steve was on that committee. There were county representatives as well, because the city and the county are gonna be joining forces on this one. And again, this is North Star, so it's hitting all the priorities. You remember the Star Center was one, and different cities are taking different things. This is ours. There is a recommendation from the committee, and I think it would be good if you all would like to put this on your agenda on fifth Wednesday. It could be a short thing, quick update from the county. Here's what we're proposing, here's what the recommendation is. Are you okay with it? And then if you're okay with it, we would put it on the first August regular meeting agenda for approval, and get that money out. And that money is, our opioid collections are just over 500,000. 20% was held back, it's going to iOS. 80% is going to this, and then there's also a small portion that will go to help fund Star Center operations as well. So anyway, got those proposals, and I get those to you ahead of time before the meeting if you want to see this on that meeting, or if you want it on a public safety committee or something like that. Let me know.
If it doesn't take a long time.
Right.
It's probably better, so that it can go on the next whenever we need to actually take action on it.
And give them 5 minutes for their overview, and then discussion time after that to see if you're okay with the recommendations. 2 organizations applied for the funding. One is Rise Recovery, one is New Earth Recovery. And anyway,
But that public safety committee would be available as well.
yep, we could do it then as well. I know that one of these organizations has a property, like, I think they're looking to make an offer, made an offer already. But that's not necessarily your emergency, but so they would probably like to know if they could get the money.
Do you want to speak to what we're gonna do next week on parks with the EV bikes?
The EV bikes, Councilmember Oliver wanted to talk participation plan, public participation plan. So we're gonna, I mean, you can still do e-bike codes fifth Wednesday, but as far as the public information plan, we're finding there are quite a few residents who are interested in this topic. And so just ironing out a plan for how we're gonna get good public participation for this will be important. So that's on next week's committee agenda. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
I think that's it.
Oh, no, Kevin said something. Kevin.
Proposition 1 ballot title. Maybe
Proposition 1 is TBD.
One sheet. The sheet will have two versions of Proposition 1, one the plain version at the bottom. One is an amended version on the top, contract version. You passed resolution 1097, which allowed the city to go up for a vote to renew the Transportation Benefit District sales and use tax for transportation improvements set forth in your plans, TIP, comprehensive plan. The resolution provided authority for the city attorney or finance director to make changes at the direction of the election office if we felt it was warranted. Ballot titles are strictly limited in words. You can have word counts you can use, and you have certain elements to it. One of the issues that we were talking about with elections is actually uncommon in the law is that you have to identify the enacting legislative body that's going to be imposing the tax. Typically be the city council. In this case, you created a transportation benefit district, and then you assumed its powers. But the transportation benefit district is still named in statute as the taxing authority. So how do you identify the enacting legislative body? Kind of odd one. So after consultation with the election department, we have come up with these changes that comply with statute. Everything in yellow is additional language, everything in strike through is removed. But basically we want to make sure that it's clear to the voters that it is the city of Mount Vernon, Washington, who would be renewing the sales tax if voted by a majority of the voters. Jurisdictions do it different ways, but this way it's clear it's the city acting as the transportation benefit district. I think you can be more clear than that. And it's within the word counts. So your first sentence below the title is identifying the legislative body, the city of Mount Vernon, having assumed the role of the Mount Vernon Transportation Benefit District of Mount Vernon, Washington. And then there was just one minor change, because we only are allowed 10 words to have a statement on the subject matter. So we had to remove an Article A and add an S to within that 10-word limit. So there you go. I do have authority to do this that was granted and delegated by that resolution, but it's a political instrument. And you're a political body, and I wanted to run it by you in case you had any reservations. But that's the main purpose. Make sure it's the city acting as the transportation benefit. If we're okay with that, I'll let the election official know. I have till August 4th, so I want to get that done.
This isn't a tax increase, this is just a renewal of a tax. It's already.
Correct. So I put that in the title, so it's very clear. It's in the resolution, it's in the body. The amount is in there. The idea is to educate and inform the voter of what they're voting for, as clear as you can.
Okay.
So I will let them know if those changes will be authorized by my office. And that's what you'll see on the ballot. Okay?
That's good.
I'll see.
Sure. Thank you.
Do we have any future agenda items? Excellent, we stand adjourned at 7:24.